Have you ever, like, stopped to think about how much we rely on our eyes? And I don't just mean, like, for seeing clearly, but how our eyes actually, like, process the world around us.
Right.
It's wild. So today we're doing a deep dive on a condition that shows just how complex that whole process really is.
Yeah.
We're taking a look at some recent articles from Kyoto News about this syndrome that's currently being called Shishitsu.
Right.
And trust me, the implications of this go way beyond just like a tricky medical
Oh,
term.
absolutely. This is bigger than just a new diagnosis. This
Yeah.
is about like how we understand and support invisible disabilities.
Exactly. So for our listeners who are hearing about this for the first time, just imagine this for a second. Okay. Your eyesight is perfect,
Right.
2020. But something as simple as using your eyes, like reading a book or just looking at a screen or even just walking down the street, it becomes incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and it's important to remember we're not talking about vision itself here. This is about how the brain is actually interpreting all that visual information it's receiving.
Oh,
Research on to see it's still pretty new, but some neurologists are suggesting that there's like a disconnect between the eyes and the parts of the brain that process those visual signals.
hmm.
So it's almost like the signals are getting scrambled or misdirected
Right.
somewhere along the way.
Wow, so it's like a processing error rather than a vision problem.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. And that can manifest in a bunch of different ways, right? Like the articles mention some people experience like uncontrollable eyelid spasms while others describe like text seeming to jump around or get all distorted.
Got it. And we can't forget about the severe light sensitivity or photophobia that often comes with this syndrome. We're not talking about just needing sunglasses on a bright day here.
Yeah.
This is talking about experiencing actual pain, even from like regular indoor lighting.
Hmm.
It can get so bad that people are forced to keep their homes practically like in darkness all the time.
Wow.
Some individuals even go as far as to cover their windows with tape just to cope with it.
Wow, I never even considered that. That's a really powerful image, though. It really makes you realize just how debilitating something we take for granted, like simply flicking on a light switch, can be for someone with this condition.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. What makes it so fascinating and challenging is the sheer range of severity we see and the fact that a lot of the time it doesn't manifest in ways that are outwardly obvious to others.
Which, as we're seeing from these articles, has really big implications when it comes to getting a diagnosis, getting support, and even just basic understanding from friends and family.
It's a double-edged sword, you see.
Hmm.
On one hand, individuals with this syndrome, they might not, quote unquote, look disabled.
Yeah,
And that can unfortunately lead to some skepticism and lack of understanding from others.
right.
But then on the other hand, this invisibility makes it that much harder for those individuals to receive a clear diagnosis and actually get access to the support that they desperately need.
Yeah, it's a tough situation all around, for sure. So we're talking about a condition that can make like even the most basic everyday things a real struggle.
Yeah.
And the articles mention a few coping mechanisms, but I'm really curious to hear more about what life is like for someone who's, navigating the world with. Oh,
Well, just imagine this for a second. You're trying to make dinner right,
uh
but the pattern on your kitchen counter is making you dizzy.
Oh, wow.
Or
Oh, wow.
or you want to read your kid a bedtime story, but even the soft light from a nightlight is causing you actual pain.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, these are the realities for a lot of people with this syndrome.
It really puts into perspective how much we take our visual comfort for granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And because the symptoms often aren't visible to others, it can lead to a lot of misunderstanding.
Mm.
People might think you're just being difficult or antisocial because you don't want to go out to dinner or you avoid stores with bright lights.
Yeah, and there's that social stigma that we talked about earlier. It's heartbreaking, really. And to make matters worse, this lack of understanding even extends to the very systems that are supposed to be providing support. I mean,
Right.
specifically the disability system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really tricky. The Kyoto News articles pointed out that Japan's disability system right now, it really relies on physical examinations and symptoms that are like easily observable.
So if your struggles aren't something that's easily seen during a quick visit with the doctor, then what?
Then it becomes a real uphill battle to prove how severe your condition actually is and to qualify for any kind of benefits.
Right.
And without that official recognition and support.
It turns into this awful cycle.
Exactly.
The articles mention something called a social insurance labor attorney. What exactly is that? What do they do?
Oh, that's a great question. So a social insurance labor attorney is basically someone who specializes in navigating Japan's social security system, which is it's complicated.
I bet.
And that includes things like disability benefits. They're the ones who are helping people gather evidence and file appeals and really just fight for the support they're entitled to.
So they're the ones who are really seeing this firsthand, all of the challenges, the gaps in the system, and advocating for change.
Precisely.
And the article also mentioned a physician who seemed to be raising similar concerns as well.
Absolutely. And when you've got both legal and medical professionals sounding the alarm like this, it really highlights just how urgent the situation is. These aren't just isolated cases. This points to a much bigger systemic issue that needs to be addressed.
It's like the classic catch-22. You need disability support to afford therapies and assistive technology and all the resources that could help you manage the condition, but you can't get those benefits without a clear diagnosis. And because of the nature of PUCAS, getting that diagnosis is really difficult.
Exactly. It's a difficult situation for sure.
It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed by all of this, But the articles did mention a few positive developments. It seems like awareness of ISA is growing. So that has to be a step in the right direction, right?
It really is. Increased awareness is absolutely crucial. The Kyoto News articles that we're looking at, they mentioned coverage on some pretty major networks like NHK and TV, Asahi. And that kind of media attention can be really impactful, not only in educating the general public, but also in putting pressure on policymakers to take action and address the issue.
And awareness often leads to community building. Have there been any efforts to kind of connect people who are living with this syndrome?
Yeah, actually. The articles mentioned that support groups are starting to pop up both online and in person, which is really encouraging. For people who have been struggling with this in isolation for so long, being able to connect with others who truly get it, it can be life-changing.
For sure.
And it also creates that collective voice that's needed to really advocate for change.
Right. And speaking of change, there was mention of the Japanese government kind of starting to acknowledge Estela and even reevaluating some disability cases. Is this the turning point that we've been waiting for?
Well, it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that systemic change, it takes time.
Yeah.
And it takes sustained effort. It's not enough to just tweak the existing framework. We might need to rethink our entire approach to invisible disabilities as a whole.
So what does that look like? What needs to happen to create a more inclusive and responsive system?
Well, for one thing, continued research on SLA is essential. The more we understand about what causes this condition, the better equipped we'll be to develop effective treatment and support strategies.
And I'm guessing advocacy is going to play a huge role here as well.
Oh, absolutely. The individuals and families who are directly affected by this syndrome, along with advocates and allies, they need to keep sharing their stories, keep pushing for those policy changes, and hold those in power accountable.
It's so important. This deep dive has really opened my eyes to a condition that I honestly knew nothing about before. It makes you wonder what other invisible struggles are out there, going unnoticed and unsupported.
It's a powerful reminder that there are so many different ways that people experience the world.
Yeah.
And our systems need to reflect that diversity.
Well said. It's about really listening to those unheard voices, understanding their experiences, and working together to create a more inclusive and equitable society for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a deep dive into a topic like this. Something that seems a little obscure at first to uncover these larger truths.
That's so true. Well, if this conversation resonated with you, we encourage you to learn more, share what you've learned, and consider how you can contribute to building a more inclusive world. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.